All right, a good Tuesday afternoon to you. I'm Fox 26 meteorologist John Dawson. Glad you found us here on our different platforms talking about our tropical update. Maybe you're watching me live. If so, of course, this is the latest information from the National Hurricane Center with their 4 p.m. update. That's Central Time. If you're not watching me live, well, there you go. Now you know where this information is, and hopefully it's the latest that you're going to be able to get your hands on, and we'll be able to dive into things and talk about what Helene is doing. If you haven't heard so far today, Helene has been finally named. It's been formed officially and recognized by the National Hurricane Center, and continuing to see its progress. Pretty much what we've expected with this system headed towards the panhandle region of Florida. So let's sort of dive into it a little bit. What we're going to see over the next 24 hours is a pretty quick intensification where we're going to go from what we have right now as a tropical storm with maximum winds at 50 miles an hour. This is going to get just to the edge of the Yucatan Peninsula and strengthen into a hurricane by Wednesday afternoon with those 75 mile an hour winds. And then as this system continues to make its turn and moving a little bit more to the northeast, it continues to gain strength. I think will also grow in size and then eventually making its landfall. One thing that has changed slightly in this latest forecast is a little bit of a slowdown, not a whole lot, but a little bit now, to where looks like this will be perhaps a night landfall, and that's going to be taking place Thursday night and into early on Friday morning. So this early Friday morning here is going to be probably 4 a.m. or so on Friday morning. Again, this is still kind of getting an idea of the timing and everything. What we really do want to stress, why I have this paused here for just a moment, is that we're not ready to focus on the center line yet. There's enough lack of information, or let's just say confidence. There's enough sort of uncertainty in this forecast that we really want to remind everybody to really focus on this entire cone of where this system could go. Not an impact cone, remember. This is a forecast cone on where the center of that low pressure system would track. So we all know that the worst of what happens with a hurricane is outside of that center, right? The eye of the storm, it's fairly calm. Outside of that eye is where all the rough stuff happens. And so if this thing ends up tracking a little bit further to the right or to the east, then you're going to have a lot more impacts further on the east side. And the same thing if it happens to go a little bit further over to the west, your impacts will be carrying over further to the west as well. So at this point in time, with the confidence that we have in this track, we are focusing on this whole yellow path as its possibility. Now, once it makes its landfall, the winds become a lot less of a threat, and so perhaps not as concerned on the exact track of where this is headed. But let's make sure we get the idea of what's happening here, as this is going to roll right through the middle of Georgia, and with all that rain on the east side of this system, bringing a lot of rain through Georgia and into the Carolinas, and then heading up towards St. Louis, it looks like, as a possible tropical depression. So that's the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. We got a lot more details now we're going to dive into a little bit, including some of those threats that we're expecting. So let's again look at this last several hours of this formation. You'll notice this is something that happens a lot when these systems are in the early stages of forming like that. We kind of have to recalibrate and kind of re-identify exactly where that low pressure system is. So you'll see it's a little bit of a wandering around a bit, and some of that is actually what's happening, and then some of it is just us trying to pinpoint where exactly is the center of that low pressure system. And this system is in an area that is not overly favorable for formation, with the fact that there are some upper level winds, some shear that's sort of slowing down everything. But that's about to change, and that's why we're seeing this sort of intensification kind of ramp up a little bit. I switched to the visible satellite imagery. This is pretty high detail, but watch what happens when we kind of get in here. You'll remember that center of circulation was somewhere in this area right here. Do you notice how we've got winds, we have different clouds kind of moving slightly different directions? And this was more noticeable earlier today because the shear was a little bit greater. But if you'll notice over on the edge of our screen here, these clouds are kind of moving a little bit different. And if you'll look down what looks to be closer to the surface, that's where they've got a little bit more of that counterclockwise rotation, and some of these other movement of clouds are not quite the same. So we've got different things happening at different levels in the atmosphere. So remember, of course, we're down here on the surface, and then as you go up into the atmosphere, sometimes the weather is, or a lot of times the weather won't be the same as what's happening at the surface. But for a tropical cyclone to really strengthen, really grow, you need that uniform effect happening where you've got sort of everything making that counterclockwise rotation. So that's starting to form a little bit more clear. I was watching this imagery earlier and it wasn't quite as clear as what we've got kind of happening right now. So as far as where this is going to go, I've been reading some discussions online, and what's interesting is when you have a system that you're expecting to sort of move one way and then make that turn another direction, trying to calculate this turn is a really big deal, because if you calculate it just a few degrees different one way or another, that can make a big difference on where it ends up going as far as making a landfall. And it doesn't take but maybe 15 or 20 miles difference on a landfall to make huge differences on those storm surge threats and the wind threats as well. But that kind of a difference is something that's a lot to do with this forecasting, this angle right here. Remember that official forecast cone took us to the Gulf and then it made that northeasterly trek? Well, you know, the Hurricane Center is doing the best they can with all the information they have to get this turn forecasted correctly. And if it ends up being a little bit different, that makes a big difference here. So that confidence in where the system goes, when I was talking about the center line, or do we look at the whole yellow cone? Once the turn is made, then the confidence will increase quite a bit with where this system is going. You've got some upper level steering here with the jet stream that's going to kind of move in along with the front. You've got high pressure that's going to be over on the east side, all of that narrowing it right through that gap where we're looking at here. This is going to be impacting us here in southeast Texas, particularly bringing in some drier air for sure. And again, that's helping to push. So that's our computer models. That's very close. They're all kind of together. We like to see that. We have some high confidence, but again, because this is a little bit tricky, that's why we'll see the forecast improve once that turn ends up taking place. And again, we've seen what we've got happening from the National Hurricane Center with their forecast. And here's one of the reasons why the strengthening is going to happen, that rapid intensification. These waters are so warm, almost 90 degrees in some spots. Probably actually is. Again, trying to measure from the satellites here in certain pockets of that, but very, very warm water, not very disturbed. It hasn't had a lot of action happening over here as of late, and this part of the Gulf of Mexico is just really ready to release a lot of that energy, and that's going to come in the form of some rain. And the Weather Prediction Center is now expecting some flooding to happen pretty much on the course of where we will see Helene track, and if not, maybe just a little on the east side of where Helene track. This is going to be Thursday into Thursday night for sure, and even into that very early time frame on Friday we were talking about because of all that rain that's going to be happening. Here's one of the more popular computer models, the European model. So this will basically sort of put more animation and more visuals to what we've been talking about. You've got that rotation that's already getting organized. You're getting some rain that's starting to get sort of more symmetrical in its formations. And as it continues to move on through, this is Friday, about 5 p.m., you'll definitely begin to see the rain, the winds beginning to make their impacts on Thursday afternoon. But that landfall is probably going to be after dark on Thursday evening. And then it continues to see, look at all that rain that continues to move up even north of Atlanta and into the Tennessee and the Ohio Valley region is where that's really pretty much going to be heading. So definitely going to be a rainmaker. People are going to be paying attention to Helene well past its landfall. But on the landfall is when we're going to have the strongest winds and, of course, the dangerous storm surge. So what we want to focus on for sure is the fact that we now have hurricane warnings for parts of the coast of Florida, and we also have tropical storm warnings as well. And even over on the Yucatan Peninsula now, looking for some hurricane warnings because those winds are going to ramp up quite quickly and could be impacting that part of Mexico. So that is certainly what we're going to focus on, is the danger from these winds, pretty much from Tampa all the way over to Panama City is where those winds are going to be taking place. We've got the hurricane warnings that are already in place now. And our storm surge is going to be a similar scenario where we're going to see a threat. You can notice all the way down to the Keys, to Key West, there's going to be expectations of storm surge, possibly even as high as 3 to 5 feet. But when we get into that same area where some of the strongest winds are going to be, those waters are really going to be funneled in. And right now, our map says greater than 9 feet. I think the expectations at this point are going to be about 12 feet for some of our highest areas. And because of the topography here, there will be some spots that even get some higher storm surge than that when that water really gets funneled in there from all those winds that are pushing. So this is one of the traditionally deadliest components of a hurricane. The threats they bring is that storm surge. So there's definitely going to be folks with some evacuations and seeking some higher ground and some strong shelters as well, as far as those winds that are going to be happening with Helene moving on through. So if you're keeping track, I just wanted you to know that we've definitely checked off our H name for Helene, and I think we're going to be starting to talk about an Isaac pretty soon. I just want you to be aware of what's happening. This is way out in the Atlantic, so it's not something that we're concerned with in the short term. Probably not going to be making a big impacts overall, but this is where we have our next system developing, and if it does get named, it would be named Isaac. And so I just kind of wanted to kind of keep you up to date overall, kind of as well as what's happening with the growth and the different busy season that we've been dealing with. So obviously, again, most of what we're dealing with is focused on Helene. And we'll continue to bring you updates here on Fox 26 with the latest on what's happening in the tropics.